Good morning. Wow. We can be thrilled by what GuideCo has succeeded to mobilize and organize in just 2 years. Through all the leading presentations we have had this morning, definitely GEI is a master key to realizing inclusive and sustainable growth worldwide and is pivotal for the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. Political awareness is growing, and many nations have made commitments. In principle, some are planning actions, often separately, and from very different perspectives. GI is a unique initiative to augment these actions by a synergetic effect while respecting independence of each nation. GI will lead the development of strategic emerging industries, building momentum for economic growth. The global estimated $1 billion investment into GI will heat up emerging industries in many areas for the construction of GI, also in the society at large. This panel session is about innovation and collaboration. And this panel is about new capabilities and condition of success, which is a select panel representing the main stakeholders categories for the future of energy from many different viewpoints, from science, engineering, economy, utilities business. I will first invite each of the panelists to highlight from their viewpoint some snapshots of a few capabilities, the new capabilities and value that GI will bring, or new capabilities that can be brought to GI so that it can deliver its value. So I'd like to invite Professor Liu to give us his first perspective on this. You have a microphone here.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to share my opinion for the GI. The China, where philosophy is very simple. That is, one earth, one family, one globe, one family. That idea comes from the Confucius. And the China, we have 3 levels for the green energy and the whole world. The highest principle is just like the chairman of China, Xi, have proposed that we have two community of shared future for mankind. That is the highest principle for us, for China, or for the whole world. The second level is, all of you know, Belt and Road. And the third level is, now we are talking about GI. So these different 3 kind of levels exactly towards one direction. one views and aims. That is the relationship between the three levels of Chinese strategy and the principles.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Liu. Yeah, sure. We have, of course, very limited time.
I just have 2 minutes.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for this very deep thinking perspective. I'd like to invite Professor Sterling to offer a snapshot.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, we all know that most regions in the world are planning greater international interconnection. So GEI is set to be a reality. So my contribution today is to identify some of the challenges, but in the context that GEI is the way forward. UHVDC will be able to transport significant proportions of a national demand. But while the DC technology has made rapid progress, there are new system control challenges, which will be my theme for today. The forts which are being launched this afternoon are excellent and detail these challenges. GEI brings opportunities for better system control, but of course more complexity to the conventional centralized control systems. Piecemeal solutions are emerging, but large-scale interconnection adds another layer where the conventional tie-line control will not be adequate. We are all used to predicting consumer demand across all timescales from years to minutes, but demand itself is becoming a control variable. Smart meters with demand management are being rolled out across distribution systems, and embedded generation and energy storage are increasingly widespread. Electric vehicle charging and domestic heat pumps represent major new loads for which our distribution systems were not designed. So dispatching generation needs to become dispatching load as well. Add to that the time dimension of energy storage, both at HV and LV, and one has an enormous opportunity for system optimization. The original network constraints haven't gone away and are even more stringent now. The system is no longer passive. Active control moves from a few thousand variables to millions and needs to be achieved in real time and interacts across international boundaries. So the challenge is how to design the overall control system that recognizes multi-corporate involvement and geographical diversity. It can be done, but it needs a body like GEICO to coordinate the international effort. Thank you, Chairman.
So thank you very much. Yes, incredible new capabilities to control the system, the overall system. Now I'd like to invite Professor Guo to offer his perspective.
We've talked about the challenges against control systems. Let me talk about analysis. In order to achieve global interconnection, if we take a look at China's practices, the large-scale interconnectivity will be able to smooth over the intermittency of wind and solar. And Mr. Ko has just instructed me to achieve hundreds of millions of kilowatts of power transmission. And so far, we need to be able to deploy a 100,000 node system, and we are looking for we need to achieve a greater computing power at the power of 4, exponents of 4. We are putting in place a supercomputing infrastructure in order to satisfy those needs. And instead of using off-the-shelf solutions, we need to put in place supercomputing platforms leveraging AI and big data analytics to be able to do better analysis.
So definitely, because of the scale of GEI, we will be able to achieve unprecedented capability to aggregate intermittent renewable energy. Now I'd like to invite Professor comes to offer his perspective.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to talk, we've heard all about computing ability, we've heard about control systems. I'd like to talk a little bit about the hardware itself. We're moving from a conventional generation system which was based on coal, oil, nuclear, etc., to a mixed generation system which includes PV, solar, hydro. And as Rob Stephen pointed out in his presentation, that changes the nature quite substantially. You're losing a lot of inertia and you're getting stability problems, you're getting frequency control problems, you're getting commutation errors, you're getting high fault levels. So that's one challenge that we need to address, in which we are building the technology, in which GEI is in the forefront to build the technology to address that. The other is simply the vast distances that you're going to transmit power over. We're already moving from an AC-based transmission system to a high-voltage DC-based transmission system. And currently that's based typically on 800 kilovolts. You've heard earlier other systems which are 400 kilovolts, etc. But we want to go to a 1.5 megavolt, 12 gigawatt, 10,000 kilometer system. That will represent a considerable challenge. And GEI, I think, is up for it. Thank you.
So once again, it's the scale of GEI will benefit from a lot of technologies that exist and that might not have up to now. And now I'd like to invite Rodrigo to provide his utility perspective.
Thank you, Richard. I come from the practical world, and while here we talk about the future, like many of us, we have to deal with this every day. I think GEI, this global interconnections initiative, really brings much more than just a better environment for the future of the planet. I look at it also on the perspective, on the economical and financial perspective. If we have good, robust interconnections, global interconnections, we will be able to do much better planning. From the backup of the systems perspective, from the fact that we will be able to much better manage the money we have. And especially the small countries, we have very small resources. And as you know, and probably also in the big countries, when we talk to governments, they have lots of priorities. Railroads, highways, hospitals, schools. And then not always they are able to look into these as a big priority for the country, because a lot of the government officials do not understand what we are talking here. And I think it's very important really to raise the attention, and I think one of the most, besides the technology pathway, besides the capacity that GEI is showing, GuideCo is showing, I think it's also very important to reach the governments and make them understand the impact of all these initiatives.
So that's fantastic opportunities actually to develop much more business capabilities, but also the outreach and connection with the citizens. Now I'd like to invite Professor Sachs to offer his perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to take the perspective of policy planning, why GEI is so important. All of the world agreed in the Paris Climate Agreement to limit global well below 2 degrees Celsius. Governments understand the implication of that, because what the climate science tells us is that to succeed in the goal that was set in the Paris Climate Agreement, we have to decarbonize the energy system by the middle of the century. Otherwise, we will not achieve the Paris Climate Agreement. Therefore, we need a global scale, revolutionary change in the energy system. it is simply not true that we can continue with coal, oil, and gas. We must make this transition if we are serious about climate safety, and we must make it a lot faster than is thought by almost any government in the world. From the point of view of climate, there is no clean coal. There is no clean gas. This is just hard reality. And GEI offers the most realistic vision of how, by the middle of the century, we could have a zero-carbon energy system. Of course, there are huge challenges, but the first is to have our policymakers around the world understand the scale of the challenge, which they do not. The second is to have them plan for moving to zero carbon. They'll see how hard it is. They don't know how to do it. They don't have plans for it. And they are not prepared for such a transformation. Third, they will understand that they cannot solve this problem at national scale. This is a transnational scale problem because the energy, the high-quality renewable energy, is not within their borders, especially given its intermittency. So this is the brilliant concept of GEI. Once that is understood, and it is not understood almost anywhere in the world, unfortunately, even though we talk about this every day, the policymakers are not planning realistically. They're still building pipelines for gas. They're still building power plants. They're still counting on oil, which is not realistic. It seems to me there are 4 fundamental challenges that need to be overcome. The first is technical. All the expertise on this panel, how would you make such a system actually work? This is not simple. I'm not an engineer. I don't understand the equations, but I do understand this is a massive technical set of challenges. The second is economic. We do not yet have the calculations of the economic benefits of the grid at multiple scales, especially the global scale. There are advantages, but there are also costs, and showing the trade-offs is important economically. The third is the financing. This project is trillions of dollars of financing when you combine generation, transmission, storage, and the rest of the systems. How will this financing be organized? And the fourth dimension is the business dimension. Even with the financing and the economics sound, you have individual utilities that have to pay the bills, collect the dues, and manage a transboundary, indeed global system. I think it is the most promising single initiative that I have heard of in more than a decade of day-to-day work policy negotiations. So finding the solutions to these 4 dimensions, the technical, the economic, the financial, and the business model, I think is crucial. There are no solutions the way that we are going right now. National scale, confusion, still building pipelines, still counting on fossil fuel. This is the dead end. GEI offers a path to success. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for highlighting so well all those dimensions at the same time. And you made a very new point, which is that definitely in each nation might be difficult for regulators or decision makers to really understand and be in a position to make a decision. But because of the global approach of GI, actually it will definitely bring a capability to share the understanding and actually make it much more easier for each nation to position itself. It's a huge new capability brought forward by the GEI offering. And it's very interesting because you offered the segue to our next topic of discussion, which is really the overall challenge that is posed to the entire community, represented somehow here in this panel. Yeah, definitely GEI is proposing a well thought of plan with 3 stages of deployment at national, continental, intercontinental levels. And also it is well known that the fast followers and not the first movers are often the real winners. So how to reward the early investors taking the pioneering risks and avoid free riders while ensuring a fair sharing of the benefits? Not all the economies are strong enough to start at the same time the investments and transformation. Which technical aspect one should pay attention to? How regulation should evolve to enable and foster GEI deployments? So it will be very interesting now to actually ask our panelists some recommendations and conditions of success to make it happen. So I'd like to invite Professor Liu to offer a recommendation or condition of success.
Yes, thanks. I would like to some new technology concern about the GEI. We do some research work personally and our PhD students in Xinjiang province and some of the countries on the road. We find the solar energy is very huge. But the desert, Gobi Desert, even you cannot find one green grass. But under your feet, underground, there are a lot of, a huge of clean water. The clean water comes from the high mountain, the ice and the snow. When the summer season, the water will get down the underground. So they have no enough energy to pump in the underground water to water the Gobi Desert. That is a big problem. So we find just 1,000 kilo water solar energy power system. We just need 6 months to finish that engineering program. And of course, the artificial oasis should wait 2 years, of course. So, if in the Gobi Desert we develop the solar energy generation state and the pumping the underground water to water the Gobi Desert, that the Gobi Desert can become artificial oasis. And under the ground, the road of many countries, even the solar energy, more than the Xinjiang province. But they now shortage the energy. So if we build the solar energy station for that countries, they can create the artificial oasis and they change the environment of the Asia.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, you're giving the example of water and water scarcity. And definitely this is a huge challenge that will even grow over time. This is a vital need. So, of course, GEI is all about energy, but we should keep in mind that the need for water is there, and this is where, through the example you're giving, you are suggesting that, of course, it's interesting to design the overall structure of GEI so that we also take into account at the same time some fundamental use of that energy to optimize not just the electric infrastructure, but the overall energy system, including the way some massive amount of energy can be used in an optimal way. Thank you very much for this recommendation. And I'd like to invite Professor Sterling to provide some recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, in my earlier remarks, I spelled out the challenges, but there is a way forward. After all, if big science can collaborate internationally to build accelerators, surely we in engineering can do so when the objective has a very direct impact on people's lives. For a century now, we've sought to control megawatts and megavars, but perhaps we're moving to an energy control system now rather than a power control system. The management of large-scale storage means that the charging and discharging will have a big effect on the network, and its geographical disposition needs careful design. Can we arrange HV storage to offset worries about short-term availability of GEI transfers? Or is there new demand management capability? Security of supply will be a key issue, as it always has been. But now not all the parameters are national. UHVDC simplifies the stability issues and helps offset national variable renewable outputs. But through flows are generally a destabilizing influence. Because the distribution system will be active rather than passive, we need a much more sophisticated real-time control system, encompassing demand management, local storage, and embedded generation control. Voltage control will be a big issue, and substantial investment in new devices will be necessary to maintain the quality of supply. A vast new telemetry system needs to be established, incorporating smart meter measurements, which will bring many consumer benefits. Funding ought not to be a problem, given that all the projections envisage a major switch to electrical forms of energy use. So GEI will force us all to have a radical rethink of our approach, including how we handle dependency on other countries in relation to hostile removal of supply. Inevitably, the overall system will be hierarchical, but it cannot be so as at present, and it will be difficult enough to find a feasible solution, let alone an optimal one. Whatever structure emerges, we'll need a comprehensive real-time simulation across the whole system to test our ideas. Accurate modeling of all plant and network on operational timescales, thankfully not transient, will be necessary. This is not a PC-sized program, but should be within the capabilities of a supercomputer, especially if the simulation can be mathematically decomposed. It can all be done, but who is best placed to do it? Well, we might ask ourselves, who has the most power system engineers in the world? China, of course. So there's another challenge alongside driving the whole world. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So definitely we can see that energy would be more important to manage than just the power, and massive use of simulation, modeling and simulation is a key to approach all of this. Now I'd like to invite Professor Guo to propose his recommendation.
Engineer, another question that I consider a lot is cost. A lot of organizations predict that by 2050, around that time, new energy's development cost can be reduced to $3. Some says even lower than 3 cents. When that can be achieved, then global energy interconnections prerequisite financially, economically, is competitive, and the rest we have to deal with is trade protectionism. Whether trade protectionism will pose a challenge to global energy interconnection. If we are to achieve the bright future, if the world's environment can be improved, then we have to open the market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's very interesting that you are highlighting that there is a kind of threshold effect where definitely when we look back in time, you see everything about smart grid since the years 2000, it's difficult to find a very appealing business case. But definitely you make the point that now with a very low cost of energy, then we're coming to the point where the business cases will be appealing, and this will trigger something that seems not really started back in time on all those deployments. Now I'd like to invite Professor Combs to offer some recommendation.
Okay. I talked in my earlier section about the ultimate aim for transmitting power over 10,000 kilometers. Now that's obviously from Russia to China. There are more immediate problems. There are more shorter areas where we need to transmit power. In, for example, China, most of the wind and the solar power is in the west of China. Most of the people are in the east of China. Now, you have something called the Heji Corridor, which connects these two areas. That's a desert area. It's very inhospitable, but it's about 1,000 kilometers over which you've got to transmit power. And one solution which is being looked at the moment is a superconducting cable. There is a demonstration cable in Bayin City. And the reason why they're looking at superconducting cables is because superconducting cables are kind of ideal. They provide a means for transmitting power with low or no loss at all. They also are self-healing in that you have if you have a fault arise, then they put impedance into the system. So here we have an ideal solution which GEI is helping to take forward and which is being investigated and which represents a massive advancement in the state of power distribution as a whole.
So that's a fantastic example of some existing technologies that is mature and maybe that has not been put to work that much around the globe. And here is a fantastic opportunity actually to leverage all of this, complementing all the capabilities of the GI infrastructures. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Rodrigo Costa to provide recommendations.
Richard. I just want to, I think the best thing that the best thing we can do to make these GEI happen is to make sure we have all the world understanding the urgency. Because I'm not sure if especially, and allow me to speak again about governments and regulators, I'm not sure if governments understand the urgency of this matter. I share with you a little situation that we had in Portugal. In the past 5 years, in average, we had 55% of renewable energy, which is it's a big number. But in 2017, we had the biggest drought we ever had this year in our country. We had severe fires, and it was a disaster. And the energy production dropped, the renewable energy dropped from 55 to 40%. And the only solution we see for this really on the long term is really if we have stronger interconnections with our neighbor countries. In our case, we only have one, which is Spain, and another one, which is Morocco. But we need to move into this direction. It's not all bad news, for sure. Last year I was here talking about our 4 days in a row in renewables. We heard the CEO of SGCC today talking about, in a region of China, 7 days in a row in renewables. There is progress, there is good signs, but I think, again, urgency is the things that we all need to understand and communicate better. We have, for sure, a lot of technology already, but as we heard from all my colleague panelists, there is still a lot missing. Betting on innovation, sharing that innovation world, it's super, super necessary. And for sure, at the moment of confusion going on and dialogue, it's very important. And what we have seen today here is really a sign of great dialogue going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd like to invite Professor Sachs to offer his recommendations.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the observation that governments don't understand the urgency. They don't understand the problem. Of course, the experience of Portugal and drought is an example of not understanding the changing context of the energy system. But again, most governments don't understand the need to fully decarbonize the energy system. So they regard renewable energy as a nice addition, but the extent of change necessary for climate objectives. They regard having more wind as pleasant and even economical, but stopping the role of oil, gas, and coal or even feasible. So in this sense, there's a great country, the United States. The government is working directly because it is in the hands of the fossil fuel industry. And so this is an example of how complex even the politics are. But I would say that specifically, we need to push the governments to long-term technical planning, because many governments cannot or do not do the long-term planning around a decarbonized energy system. Until they do, they will not understand this problem. I know that in the region I live in the United States, they never studied a decarbonized system for the northeast of the United States until this year, because it was going to be based on natural gas. That was the assumption. And so it's only this year that they're even studying how to get to a decarbonized energy system. Now their eyes are, and they realize that one part has hydroelectric power from Canada. They've had a problem specifically until now. Not scale that needs to be done. So my first observation to push our governments to study the long-term, it's 30-year transformation to zero. And then they have to understand that this means electric vehicle heating. It changes the building codes. It changes the not only the power generation sector. That's second. of course, it changes the grid. You're the experts on that. Grid is, of course, a new part of my recommendation, of course, is for China and its neighbors to do this, not just to talk about it, but to do it, to use the Belt and Road Initiative as the absolute place where GEI gets accomplished early on. And China will demonstrate, together with the neighbors, how this can be done, and then others will see that this is real, and everybody will run to it. They're not running now because they don't even understand what is the challenge. Once they see that it's practical and that it's happening, they will run to it. I would recommend for GEI, of course, that to speed this process, this concept of detailed modeling is crucial. But I would add the modeling partly on the technical side, which I only bow my head in admiration for the detailed grid modeling, but also the modeling of the economics, the finance. I forgot one dimension, and that is the governance and security. To ensure that if you're connected to this system, the energy, and you're not going to be told, so sorry, we had to stop it. We had an emergency in my own country. And I mentioned that interconnected trading system and an agricultural export say we can't export food to you anymore. And so then countries need self-sufficiency in food. And that in energy also. We need to make a conviction that energy can be traded at global scale, and national plans can be international plans with security. Well, this is a big challenge, but the world needs this absolutely, and I think that only China is up to it right now to scale solutions of this kind. And so we really admire GuideCo for taking the lead on this, but not only admire it, we depend on it.
Oh, thank you very much. So definitely GI is a strategic path to accelerate energy transition. It will happen progressively and concurrently everywhere in the world, taking into account, well, local priority needs and the best contributions. This will benefit to all, and there are some key recommendations to make this happen, and I hope I will do justice to what has been suggested here, but we heard some technical recommendations where there are some existing technologies that have not yet been considered enough, like superconductors, and definitely we need to look at this overall electric system from the angle of the energy more than just the power, and definitely modeling and simulation can do and provide much, much more. But of course, is to keep working on the business cases and on explaining and showing that now the benefits can really actually exceed the cost, which has been a challenge for years in everything about smart grid, and especially with the very, very low cost of generating renewable energy. Now we should highlight the fact that those business cases deserves a decision to go forward. And again, this is where modeling and simulation can bring a lot of demonstration. But most importantly is to keep explaining again what is the problem, what can be done, and definitely entice decision makers to be able to make their share, but regulators to understand and start to allow that will be different, definitely for to be able to really grab benefits for the citizens. And this should allow actually start to do some long-term planning, long-term meaning, well, already 30 years. It's very, very extremely concrete. So I would like to really encourage GI to keep striving for ambitious commitments and excellence. And let's leverage GI, the only concrete global game in town as of today. Please join me to thank and congratulate this exclusive